Welcome back, folks, to another Archetype review. I'm Frizz, and today we're going to be talking about the Dandy archetype. Dandies are all about being master socialites and helping out both yourself, predominantly, but also helping out your friends a bit. It has a ton of uses, and it really makes the most out of both the deception and the society skills. It's just an incredible archetype for the party face, as in, I think it's the archetype for party faces. It's just a really fun archetype, even if it doesn't give you many abilities to actually use directly in a combat, but it will be incredibly useful in intrigue and RP-focused campaigns. Anyway, let's just jump right into things rather than waffling around for all too long here. The Dandy dedication becomes available at level 2, and it requires that you're trained in diplomacy, which is a pretty fair assumption for a socialite. You can now use diplomacy to influence rumors, and this is a downtime activity that takes a full day. You then attempt a diplomacy check against a DC decided by the GM, though the size of the community is the main thing that determines that DC. The example DCs that they give is that the DC for a small town is a DC 15, DC 20 for a normal town, DC 30 for a city, and DC 40 for a metropolis. But I feel like it's important here to ask your GM whether or not you can try and influence the rumor in a subsection of a larger city or town. Say, if you're in a metropolis, metropolises are generally divided up into sectors, where it's like, there's the docks sector, there's going to be a more rich side of town, there's going to be the poorer side of town, there's going to be an industrial area probably. Of course, this is using more modern examples, but there are still going to be sections of cities. So if you are in a metropolis and you're level 2, that you have like a 0% chance of actually being able to influence a rumor, because that's DC 40 for a level 2 character. That's just not feasible. But maybe you might be able to influence one specific neighborhood. So it's still a pretty useful ability, you just need a little bit of a lenient GM. If you succeed on this check, then you influence a particular rumor or you start a new one spreading around. So you could try and ruin someone's reputation or improve your own, or just try and set up rumors that will help out the party somehow. It's an ability that requires a lot of help on your end, a lot of creativity, and just, it has the potential to be great. In a city-based campaign, this can be wonderful, but if you're, traveling through the wilderness a lot, then it's not going to be all that useful, which you'll see is a running theme for this archetype. The last effect of the Dandy dedication is that you become trained in deception and society. If you're already trained in them, then you become an expert in them instead. So, yeah, that's 2 free skill increases for taking a dedication, which is wonderful. In level 4, the Distracting Flattery skill feat is amazing, and it requires being an expert in deception. It is a reaction that triggers whenever someone's attitude towards you or an ally would decrease due to an ally's behavior. This could be someone trying to make a request of someone, or someone, coercing someone, or someone just kind of being an asshole at a social event. Whenever this trigger would happen, you cut in with some sort of flattery or excuse for their behavior, and you try and save face. And this allows you to make a deception check versus whoever's attitude would be decreasing's will DC. If you succeed, then their attitude doesn't decrease at all, because you managed to pass off your ally's behavior as some sort of acceptable sort of thing, or just distract them from what happened in the first place. If you fail, then you don't manage to get their attention, and then their attitude towards you decreases as normal. If you critically fail, though, then you do manage to get their attention, by making it worse, which is obviously not ideal. When this happens, their attitude decreases by an additional step, because you made it worse, so now someone can go from neutral and just not really caring about you to being hostile. So really, try not to critically fail. The thing that I love about this feat is that this allows you to have a bit of insurance for your other party members who might not be spec'd into social skills to still be social and outgoing in a party without there being big downsides. There's a running trend that I see in a lot of parties that I've been in, and from what I've read online, a lot of other parties, where the people who are not trained in something like diplomacy, or characters that don't have a lot of abilities based around talking to people, just don't talk to people. They let the party face go and do the talking for them, which I think is a shame because it means that some people just don't talk to NPCs as much, and a lot of the fun of the game, in my mind, is talking to NPCs. But there is a reason behind that, which is normally you have the potential to fuck over the rest of the party if you happen to roll bad, and if you're not trained in diplomacy, then that chance is pretty high. Distracting Flattery just gives you a nice safety net, where it'll allow basically everyone in your party to go off and do whatever stupid stuff they want to do in a social gathering without the downsides, which I think is nice. It's a nice way to save your own face in a social environment, but it's also just a nice way to be able to allow your party to go off, do stupid stuff, and get away with it. Also on level 4, but not a skill feat, is Gossip Lore. Also, I'm just going to point out that due to this not being a skill feat and Distracting Flattery being a skill feat, if you grab both of them, then you can now get a new dedication at level 6, or if you're playing free Archetype, another one at level 4. This is great, and it's a huge boon for every single Archetype that has a skill feat and a normal feat at level 4. But let's just actually get down to it and start talking about Gossip Lore. Whenever you take Gossip Lore, you now become trained in the Gossip Lore skill, which can be used only to recall knowledge, but you can use it to recall knowledge on literally anything. The interesting thing about Gossip Lore in comparison to other lores, like, say, the Lore Master lore, which is with the Lore Master dedication and whole archetype, is that whenever you fail with Gossip Lore, then you automatically get the effects of dubious knowledge, meaning that you're going to get some true information and some false information. This, it fits great with Gossip. Gossip is often not entirely true, or it's exaggerated, or just there's a bit of a lie in there. So having dubious knowledge for free on something that can be applied to literally any kind of recall knowledge in the game is wonderful. Additionally, once you become legendary in society, then you become an expert at Gossip Lore, and Gossip Lore's proficiency cannot be increased any other way. It's still great. Being able to recall knowledge on anything is a huge amount of fun. At level 7, Fabricated Connections is another skill feat, and this time it requires being a master in deception. And Fabricated Connections comes down to the simple idea and concept that connections between people are simply a matter of perception. If someone comes up to you and convincingly says, "Yeah, I'm a friend of your parents. We haven't talked in a while, but yeah, we used to be great friends back in the day," you are automatically going to be assuming that that person's probably true, they seem trustworthy, but the reality of it is that they only seem trustworthy because of your perception of them. So, if you take the Fabricated Connections feat, you're just really good at acting like you have great connections and everybody knows who you are, despite no one actually knowing who you are. You can now use deception instead of another skill whenever you're attempting to earn income, make an impression, make a request, or even subsist. It's important to keep in mind that you can only use this to make an impression or a request once per day, and once a week whenever you're trying to earn income or subsist. But it's still wonderful. You can basically just go around and mooch off of people, simply because they think that you're in a position where you should be mooching off of them, which is a ton of fun. Also, just because I find this hilarious, you can somehow subsist in the wilderness using deception instead of survival. Because it just says subsist, not subsist in a city and you replace society. So I just find it kind of funny. The last feat of this archetype is probably the most specific feat in this entire archetype, but it's still really interesting, and in some campaigns it's going to be great. It's another level 7 skill feat, but this time it requires being a master in society. Have you ever just wanted to get into an invitation-only party, but you were turned away at the door because, you didn't have an invitation? Now you can never be in that situation again. You can just spend 1d4 hours to get entry without needing any skill checks. And you get to bring your entire party with you. This doesn't mean that you'll necessarily get an invitation, though, because it could be something where you get a temporary job in the kitchen, or someone's looking for a date, or they could be looking for some form of entertainment where they allow you in. Regardless, it gets you in there, which is really the hardest step in the first place, because now you can do whatever it is that you are looking to do in that party. It's important to keep in mind that this doesn't mean that you can get in everywhere. This is generally meant for large gatherings with lots of staff and just lots of people where not everyone knows each other personally. So you won't be able to get into personal events or events that don't have staff or something like a secret meeting that no one knows about. In some campaigns, this is going to be amazing. In others, it will be completely useless. By level 7, you're going to know which campaign you're in and whether or not this will be useful to you. Overall, I feel like the Dandy does the job well and doesn't really try to be anything else. It's great for playing a foppish sort of character who knows their way around polite society like the back of their hand. In the campaigns where it will fit, this archetype will truly shine. In others, it'll have some useful abilities. You can always use Gossip Lore. Gossip Lore is fantastic. You can use that to recall knowledge on literally any creature that you fight. But the other feats are generally much more situational and require being an RP, so depending on your party or the kind of campaign you're in, you'll get different amounts out of it. Overall, I just love it. It's a great way to use deception and society in more unique ways, and it's just a ton of fun. Plus, it's the only archetype that I can think of that actually has more skill feats than normal class feats, which is just interesting. Thanks for watching. If you've got any ideas on what I can do better or specific topics that you'd like for me to cover, whether that's a archetype or a specific ruling or a skill, basically anything, let me know down below. I do read all of the comments, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Also, liking and subscribing would really make my day. Until I see you next, live a wonderful life.